if we do just, again, read his word and try not to add to it, and he's simply saying, go, right? If you love me, obey. I want you to go and I want you to do. I think we have to do that first and foremost before we think and feel a little bit. And I'm a head guy, so I'm a thinker. My wife's an emotional girl. She's a feeler. But at the end of the day, it technically doesn't matter what she feels, and it technically doesn't matter what I think. We are called to go and we were called to do regardless of what I think or what she feels. We have to honor the word and obey the commands that I think he's put in front of us.
So good. Taylor, why don't you just tell us where you are, who you're with, and then we'll just roll from there.
Yeah. So I'm in San Antonio, Texas, with my good friend, Dr. Chalie Foltz. Chalie is a friend that I met probably 2.5 years ago. He runs an org here called the Good Hood. I'm going to let him share some of his story, but I'm just here kind of learning from them, seeing what's going on in their community. They're really connected and a part of like the Brave Cities vision and movement and hunger to see the kingdom. So we're going to just get into it, let Chalie talk. We'll ask questions, we'll share thoughts, and see what plays out. So Chalie, you want to take it?
Yeah, for sure, man. Just great to be with Taylor. I am the president of the Youth Halter Fan Club, so that's one of my claim to fame so far in life. So I'm really
that's a great fan club. It's a great fan club.
Yeah, three members right now. We're growing fast, exponentially, however. So we're really excited about the future for that. But in all seriousness, it's been great connecting with Taylor and knowing Hugh, and just grateful for the work kind of God's been doing in our lives and down here in our community. And just to kind of frame it a little bit, you know, I didn't grow up in church. My parents attempted to raise me Catholic. I quickly rebelled from that side of things. And although I sort of, I guess, achieved some worldly success in different ways, shapes, and forms, my life was pretty messy. Went through a divorce, had some real difficult seasons through alcohol and different types of things like that. But, you know, God kind of grabbed hold of me. I wish I could say it was like because I was doing something good, but it was really just because he was good. I was actually started going to church because I was trying to date a girl that was about 10 years younger than me after my divorce. And so if he can work through that, he can kind of work through anything. And, but I started going to church. I got quote unquote saved at sort of, you know, the sort of traditional evangelical, non-denominational church experience that we kind of have here in Texas most times. And I was doing the things that good Christians do. I joined a small group, and then I was really, you know, tracking well. I went on a mission trip to Mexico, which really sort of ups your spiritual status in the world of Christianity today. But the reality of what happened in that moment was there was some cartel shooting and some different things that were going on right before we left. And at that time, I had gone through the divorce. I was really the provider and primary caregiver for my 2 boys. And I was just scared. Like, I didn't want to go. Didn't want to do it. A lot of fear. And I woke up in the morning. We're supposed to leave and sort of made this sort of plea to God, more demand, I guess, than anything. And I said, hey, I'm going to read a devotional. It better be good, or I'm definitely not doing this. And it happened to be a devotional on John 15 about the vine and the branches, but in particular, it was this devotional about a garden and the pruning and the pain that's associated with pruning so that growth can happen. And so the end of the devotional, I think in true Jesus fashion, ends with a question, which is, do you want me to quit pruning you? And so I was able to muster up enough faith to kind of overcome my fear in that moment and kind of went on that trip. And that was the moment I think I really got saved, kind of saved from, you know, faith that is from me versus faith that is kind of from God. And that kind of set me on this trajectory to like lead to where we are today. But it was a little bit of a messy process. I had a lot of anger, a lot of arrogance. But in San Antonio, the way that our city is structured, we are the most socioeconomically segregated city in the United States, meaning the wealth gap from the rich to the poor is the greatest in this city versus any other city. And I happened at the time to live in the zip code that had the most wealth. And through some really formative experiences and some books, in particular, Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne, I sort of felt called and led to sort of leave behind the life that I had in what's called Stone Oak here in San Antonio and move to the east side of San Antonio, which is one of the poorest zip codes in our city. And it wasn't because we thought we had it all figured out. It was kind of because we knew that we didn't. And we sort of needed to relearn faith in what we thought of this world. And it was really, in many ways, more about what I think God wanted to do in us versus what he wanted us to do. And so I was able to be fortunate enough to meet my wife, Jen, and she was willing to kind of follow me on this crazy journey. So we just basically moved. We had really no plan, no strategy, no really idea of what we were doing. And we just sort of sold everything and moved down here with the idea that, man, if Jesus was anywhere in our city, it definitely wasn't in these big buildings up where people were saying he was. We really felt like he was going to be down with the broken and with the people that we now call sort of family and friends. And that journey for us started about 10 years ago when we actually moved. And, we just came down here and we were trying to help people, love people. They were trying to help us, love us. And in the process, we formed a nonprofit, not because it was like part of the plan necessarily that we had, but we kind of had to do something because people were kind of like, well, who are you? Or what are you doing? And we kind of needed donations. And so the nonprofit kind of formed more out of a necessity than anything else. And from that, we did what a lot of nonprofits do, a lot of churches do when you come into a neighborhood that's kind of like ours, really like under-resourced, poverty type of situations. And so we did the after school program thing, and, we would do an event here or an event there. But really it was just God working in the margins through the people and in the place. It had nothing to do with anything we planned, because anything we planned at the beginning in particular was really it just was horrible. It just never really worked out well. And anything that we tried to make work was more just metrics and measures that we wanted to sort of justify that we were doing a good thing. True fruit that kind of came from God always happened when he was kind of orchestrating that. And we were just kind of being patient as he brought people and he gave us perspective. And so just over time though, and when I say time, it was probably 5 years, that it was just about building trust. It was just about building relationship. It was just about getting to know people and gain perspective and kind of getting rid of all that we thought we knew and really embracing all God wanted to show us, that this nonprofit sort of really formed into the image I think that he wanted it to, which we now call the Good Hood. The Good Hood is this idea that God can make all things good, that we live in what people would coin the hood, that has a negative narrative, but I think God has eyes and sees things in a much different way than we do. And so we want people to do the same, to see this place that we live and the people that we know as good, to see the beauty, even though that there's brokenness. And so after that 5-year kind of window of just kind of like experimenting, learning, growing, kind of gaining perspective, we really started to build trust. And that's where things kind of started to change for us. And I think that trust doesn't come when things are always good. Trust sort of happens for us, we found, when things get bad. And there was a shooting that happened across the street from our house. And a couple kids got killed, and people came to us like, are you moving now? Like people from the neighborhood. And we're like, no, this is our place. This is where we live. You're family and friends, and it doesn't matter how bad things get. Like, we're in this. This is our home. And there was something in that because something bad had happened and we still wanted to be here, they kind of really started to change things, really started to open doors. Opportunities started to present themselves. And so now moving forward, we definitely have sort of created this community ecosystem, like situation and circumstance where I think the community takes better care of us than we take care of the community. But from the time down here and from the relationship that had been built, we've been able to build what I think is, a picture of the kingdom of God, where kids are starting to get better educations, or we're creating job opportunities for them, where people are starting to, come out of addiction or overcome the obstacles that are set up by certain oppressive systems that are kind of put in place to kind of hold people back. And so for us, it's basically just goes back to, this idea of reading the Bible and then just doing what it says. And that's kind of like the idea of like kind of keep it simple, stupid. But when Jesus always talks about the kingdom come, the kingdom of God looks like this, and then you just sort of then do what it says, then he can do what he does. And I think that's just how we got here today, if that makes sense. So,
Hey, Charlie, can I ask you a question real quick?
yeah, of course.
This is Hugh Halter here. Okay.
So nice to meet you. I've heard so much
too.
about you,
Yeah. So I've been down there, got to see your family living in the house, got to meet quite a few people in your community. Taylor and I have been talking a lot about that Luke 10 passage. Maybe we can go off this a little bit just related to this, but a lot of people that are starting an ecosystem, they get pretty amped about like the first year, like what are we going to do, and feeling like they got to have a plan. But it sounds like you literally didn't have a plan, but you did feel like your first move was actually to move in, right? Without any clear directives. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we definitely knew we wanted to be here, but we also definitely knew that we didn't know what we needed to know. And we allowed ourselves a lot of permission to make mistakes, to kind of experiment. And with the idea of an experiment, you sort of learn something no matter what. Like experiments, if they don't work, teach you something. Experiments, if they do work, they teach you something. But we definitely took on the postures of, we have so much to learn. And so to have any sort of plan, it's like talking to someone who's in kindergarten and asking them where they want to go to college. It's not going to hold up over time. You just don't have the perspective. And so we really tried to stay humble and know that we needed to move, and we had the passion and purpose to be here, but God would reveal the plan over time.
Yeah, it's cool. I just think, like it seems to be like a common thread that these ecosystems that tend to make it the long haul, long haul for a lot of us, might be more than 5 years. But it really is that first season is really about seeking the peace, getting the respect, getting the authentic relationships to where you can move out from there. So anyway, I just keyed in on that. It's, I know you guys were trying stuff, but really it was about getting the people to trust you guys. And I love the way you said that it really happens when the crap hits the fan. So maybe that first, you think of anybody listening to this, thinking about building an ecosystem, I really think you probably should think of the first 5 years as literally just setup and just posturing and positioning yourself as a missionary team and kind of almost waiting for stuff to happen. In our little Alton story, we had a prominent Black business owner get killed a few months ago, and that was kind of a watershed moment. People, we were doing the party for her in the post, and people were actually saying that they felt like we were at least a part of the process of healing, a lot of the brokenness around her death and stuff like that. But and even that, like I remember our team that night was a watershed for our team, because I think a lot of our team felt like, we're doing coffee, we're doing businesses, but are we really making a difference? And it seemed like that one event helped our whole team to realize that we actually did have a growing sense of respect in the community, and therefore we could do more stuff now because we had some respect. So
I want to throw an
that's
idea.
all I have to say.
I want to throw an idea about out like on the back of your story. So one, it's crazy how much of your story I relate, not just resonates, but like specifically relate to, and as you kind of go through. But rather than kind of, I want to pick up on what Hugh pointed out, and like this idea of like moving as the first move is kind of moving and being in the place, and so the place and you talk about like the perspective and the ability to get in there and learn. And this might be related to some of the church history stuff. So like there's these words that get thrown around in like church, missionary world, theological words. So you have like first this concept of, these are going to be familiar, I'm sure, to all of you, but you have this idea of orthodoxy, right? Like this idea of right thinking or theology or whatever. And that's been really important to church folks along the way. But along the way, then you get like, I don't know, I think probably liberation theology and some other kind of similar ideas that'll say it actually really matters how you act, how you embody those ideas, right? Like what Jesus said, be right about that, but also like to do it. So this like orthopraxy, right? Like living that thing out. And then someone comes along, like quoting Paul, and says, well, if you know, surrender your body to the flames, but don't have love, it's nothing. And you go, okay, there's this like idea of pathos, like orthopathos, like the right heart, right? And I feel like this is the one. So those are all like, that's a common frame. And as I think about that and I listen to your story and Hugh kind of observing that, something I've been thinking a lot about and have done some writing about. And I actually think like I looked it up. Does anyone use this word? So I looked up like, well, what would place be in that language? Like Greek, like what's the, you know, those are all Greek kind of play on right, whatever. And it's topic, like a topical cream goes on a place on your skin. And I looked it up. Does anyone use like orthotopic? And it is used, but only in medical fields where it means like, you know, if you get in a car accident, your organ is orthotopic. It means it's in the right place. It's not, so your kidney's not where it doesn't belong or whatever. It's in the right spot. But I wanted to like put that frame to you and ask you about the importance of place, because I think for me it's become like this, and even picking up on what Hugh pointed out, I think it's been centrally important, like that if you put yourself in that place, like as you move to the east side and you put yourself in that place to learn and gain perspective and hear from others and experience and walk with folks in solidarity and build those relationships, like then those other things that people think so much about, it like puts you in a place to think right because you have the vantage point, let's say, of the poor and the hurting or whatever. It actually demands righteous action because of the systems and the things that you're confronted with. Like you have to actually act. And it is kind of like you're faced with heartbreaking reality. So like feeling, action, and thinking to me seem to all grow out of that first move. Anyway, I want to make that kind of as a statement, but then put it back to you and ask you to like reflect on that frame a little bit and see how that kind of resonates and how you would think about the importance of place, even just theologically, missionally, whatever, like how that seems like a central first move for you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that the theology of place is probably one of the biggest things that people don't pay enough attention to. I mean, so many people, when they were named by the place that they were from. So even Jesus of Nazareth, like there's an association that you exist in part. Your identity is the place that you're ultimately from, and to be associated with the place, I think that a person in the place, it creates so much of a level of importance about who you are, who your family is. And we've a little bit, I think, detached from that as the church, unless we want to use it to justify where we feel like we've been called to, right? Like, oh, I've been called to this place. And, you know, whether that's true or not, we maybe won't get off topic as far as how people use place at times to justify where they want to go or what they want to do. But for us in our story, it's integral to the formation of our faith, both the people and the place, and how those play together in the formation of who we are becoming in Christ through that process. I don't think that you can minimize the level of importance of place in theology, of who God is as a creator, not just of people, but of places, and the intentionality of how it orchestrates and is surrounded by class and color and culture and all of these things that sometimes are done in a bad way, but then sometimes in a redeemed, restored way can be absolutely beautiful. And so for us, one of the biggest compliments that I think that has sort of come to me is I've been called Eastside Chuck. So like when people in certain circles, they're like, oh, there's Eastside Chuck. And it's like this idea that I am known like on the East Side more affectionately by people from the East Side, that they sort of have given me that name. And so in that, to be, I think, an outsider that's been accepted in some ways as an insider is sort of the highest compliment that I can receive, but also that I then want to then communicate, like I want to be seen as the East Side. I want to be recognized that this is the place that I live and the people that I'm proud of. And so I don't think that we can continue just to be defined by like what we think or how we feel or what we do, but where we live also is a statement of our faith in and of itself. And so I'm right there with you on the idea of place and the importance that it plays in our theology and how we live out our faith, in this world and where Jesus has called us to.
John, do you feel like those concepts are chronological, that there's an order to them?
Well, I do in the development of like in theological thought. I think those, you can map those like orthodox, really, I think they go in a timeline. But like it one day in my head, like I was like looking that up and I found that word and I was like, this is like felt like the one real, like I need to add this to this conversation. Because I actually think it's primary. And in terms of discipleship, I would say this is all that matters. Like just literally move to the neighborhood and enter into your discipleship and your training and whatever. It's like all of those other things I think are byproducts, not something to like, obviously we could take education and learn things to think about or whatever, practice, action, that's all good. But I think this idea of place to me becomes centrally important where, even it's like this idea that you move to a place, you don't have a master plan, you don't have a thing, you just submit yourself to, and this is related to, I guess, my kind of thinking about, I always push back about us thinking about solutions and thinking about fixing things as much as like committing ourselves or marrying the problem, going, I'm going to give myself to this place. I'm going to give myself to this people, like in matrimony, like in covenant, like relationship. And then their problems become my problems. And then we have a broken street light and like those things, then like that move, then we enter into both perspective, feeling, demand for action, heartbreak, because they're our family that are suffering, our brothers and sisters that are suffering, and we put ourselves into that place. And so for me, the proximity to the poor or proximity to suffering, I think is some fundamental move that all those other things grow out of. So I don't know if I'm directly addressing your question. I think they come chronologically in like history of Christian thinking, but I think primarily one matters, and it's the one that feels like new to the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, I also wonder if it's like a pool that we swim in. Like I definitely see the chronology of it. Like our thoughts of God draw us to the heart, or probably more to the practice. The practice really opens up our heart and shows like, oh man, I got some messed up stuff going on in my heart. And then we see God deeper, which brings us to that idea of like, where are you leading me? Because when I think of discipleship, one of the first things I think of is this moment in Luke 10 where Jesus sends these guys out, or Matthew 10, it was even less. It was, I think he sent out like 15 or 16 of them, the men and some women. And then in Luke 10, it was maybe 72 or a little more. And that idea or that moment kind of catalyzes discipleship for me, is I'm going where you say. And I think that's an interesting conversation too, because that really culminates this idea of we are followers of Jesus. We're not followers of orthodoxy. We're not followers of an idea. Yeah. Orthopraxy. We're not followers of a formula, an action of that idea. And then orthopathos. We're not followers of even like a feeling. That's right. Like I feel love towards everyone. I think that culmination is in the orthotopic of, no, we're followers of where you say go, because the commission says, go and make disciples, teaching them all the things that I've taught. To me, the first question is where? And, that opens up the door to all kinds of awesome conversation of, well, where could be something as ethereal, or I guess as philosophical as family, like where to my family or to my people. But then too, he sent them to specific places. I imagine that moment. I wonder what it was like, him saying, all right, Taylor, I want you to go to the east side. Charlie, I want you to go over to, this community. John, I want you to go here. And Charlie and I talked about this a lot last night, and maybe we can dig into this on another episode, but just even reimagining that moment of Luke 10 when he sent them out, because I think in any teaching that Jesus gave us, you also have to apply these paradigms of culture, of tradition, of the space and place and season of life that you're in. So when I look at Luke 10, when he says, go, my disciples, go, and let's say he says, go and do this in these places. Well, for me, or let's say for Charlie, we're here in the East Side right now. I doubt how that applies to him was go in on a Monday, right? Find a man that's peaceful in the neighborhood, who everyone trusts, tell him good news, and if he receives you, have dinner at his house that evening, and on Tuesday, leave, and you've done my will. And if he doesn't receive you, literally shake some dust off your feet. Oh, and in the meantime, heal the sick and cleanse the leper. Try to do that pretty quick. And then if you get a moment, cast out some demons. I think there's such a clear, more robust understanding of what he's telling us to do. And after hearing, Charlie's story, I hear of this family that moves into a neighborhood, and literally for the first 4, 5, 6 years, they're just building peace here. Peace relationally, peace economically, literally justice, like peace through justice, peace through the education system. But mostly just we're here, and like you said, your broken streetlights are becoming our broken streetlights. Your poor school system is becoming our poor school system. So now we're going to work towards that. And then I'll end with this and see if you can find an avenue in right here. So I see it more as a pool that we swim in, as opposed to just a chronological order, because to me, my theological concepts of God almost started over, or went into maybe graduate level once my place changed.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So we always reference Matthew 25. Jesus says, if you give a cup of cold water, you give it to me. Go to where the poor are. So I went through that progression, orthodoxy, orthopraxy, orthopathos. And then my own personal testimony, 29 years old, Jesus said, I want you to go here specifically. I went, and it's like everything started over.
Right,
and I just started
where it goes. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that's that, and I want to let Charlie jump in to see where this resonates. But no, I'm just saying, and that's what I think is my experience is similar to yours. But I'm like, that move is where it begins. And it's like, not that stuff, like all that stuff that preceded it probably led me to that moment, to that ability to go, to the reason to go, and all those things. But then you go, you find yourself in the East Side, and you go, oh man, I gotta start over. I gotta reread these books. I gotta rethink about this perspective. I need to sit with my neighbor and ask them how they see the city, how they see the scripture, how they see God. And I need to enter into like their tutelage, to like be raised up. It's like you go back, and it's like, and my thought is, can we just start there? Now maybe that's, I don't know, overly hopeful. Charlie, let
me say something.
Time out before either of you talk. The old guy, this is Hugh Halter. I have a question. I'd like Charlie to coach me on this. Okay. When we roll into Alton, and within a year we're opening up a business, like the Post, that was very high profile. Did we make a mistake? Should we have, we talk about space making as the new evangelism. Should we have slow played that? Or is there room in there for just embedding ourselves, the Emmanuel, God with us? Do we just go in very quietly, very subversively, and commit not to do anything for a season? Or do you think in some of our ecosystems, we need to actually create the spaces that allow us to really kind of be more embedded? Like sometimes I would say, I actually think we might have moved too fast. The problem is we got the building given to us at that point. So it wouldn't have made sense to just sit on the building, right? We had to like do something with it. And I think probably our presence, because of the businesses and the high profile, I think it hurt us with some people, and I think it helped us with other people. But I'd love some coaching on that. I'm just the old guy. I don't look up words like orthotopic like John over there. Okay, I'm just a dumb old guy that rolls into a town. So speak to the other dumb people. Should we? You got my question? Do we create spaces, or do we chill?
I think that the illusion is that we can come up with a series of steps to follow that ensure our success. Mm-hmm. And I think the reality is we really have to focus on being faithful over being successful. And when we're faithful, we might still make mistakes. But mistakes that we feel like we make are not always mistakes as far as God's perspective, right? Like he might be using that mistake to inform and influence like how we then handle the next situation or circumstance. Like, is it a mistake? Is it not a mistake? Maybe, maybe not, but he didn't make a mistake. Like he uses everything to inform and influence what he wants you to do when he wants you to do it. And so, your story, being in Oregon versus being in Colorado, now being in Illinois, like all of it is not wasted. Like all of it is this preparation and this growth for you to become who he wants you to become, to develop your faith how he wants it to be. And so then he might use that in certain ways or times in Alton. Could you have waited? Maybe. But if he's giving you a building, like, I don't know how you necessarily don't take the building, right? Like there's things that are prescriptive and there's things that are descriptive in some of the work that we do. But I like this idea that a little bit the magic is in the mystery. Like there's stuff that we can do with our own hands and plans and all those kinds of things. But there's not a whole lot of faith that's required if it's always done by our plans with our hands. Like there's the real faith, the real kingdom of God, the thing that I think makes this fun and like it's worth like giving your life up for is the magic that comes from that mystery that is God, that is the kingdom. And if it was all facts and just figured out, like, what are we doing? I mean, that would be nice, I think, in theory, but like the reality of it is yeah, we make mistakes every day down here. But he is faithful even when we're not. And I do think, though, to maybe answer the question more directly for people who are listening, I do think we probably come in with too many plans, too many strategies, make too many moves quicker than we should.
Right. Right. But I think what's great about both of y'all's stories, you hear Hugh and Alton, is you both went in with not much planned, right?
Right.
So the beauty of what Charlie's saying to me is, no, we go in with our hands open. It doesn't matter if we're given an old used bike that we can use, that we can rebuild to help a dude with transportation, or if we're given a 15,000 square foot abandoned post office to turn into a restaurant and event center. I feel like the idea still remains that we're going in to bring peace. And I'm not a big fan of formulas at all. Y'all know that, but it does seem like Jesus gives us a bit of a framework to look at there, right? Like, I'm not asking you to go in and right away start casting out demons and healing all the sick people. so to speak. I'm asking you to go in and just find peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you thinking, Hugh? Your camera's not on, so we don't even know if you're there.
I'm here. This is Hugh Hall. I just feel like I just want to be with you guys. So I'm actually in a closet in a big church craft room. So I'm just happy to be in the conversation right now. No, I actually asked the question to Charlie because I feel like that's maybe one of the most practical things people wonder about when they hear stories like ours. Like, did you go in with a full plan and just get after it, or is there a season of waiting before you move? I think Taylor, you probably hit the good middle ground. You go in and you try to be obedient to whatever you think will bring peace. And yeah, Charlie, you're great to say we are going to make mistakes. I think probably in our case it was probably the right thing to move quick and open this thing.
And he's gone.
That was it. The Lord did not want to hear what he had to say on that one.
I love this too. I want to show this. This is a book that they have around here in some of the spaces that they've created. Hugh, you back on? All right, I'm going to keep talking. So,
yep, I'm back. Sorry about that.
I don't know if you can see this, ma'am. This is a book, and this is kind of a branding that you guys are building here. It just says we live here. And I've loved this, man. It's everywhere. It's like outside painted on the sidewalk, and they got shirts and they got, beautiful pictures. And I think it's just it's a testament of the many incarnation that we are all called to when we surrender. Because what I was going to say, just to transition back into Charlie again after what you said, John, I don't know that I would say it's like we begin at the place. I think it's more of, okay, so for me at least, it was the progression in my connection with and journey with and depth into the heart of God. So if I just started at the tell me where to go, I would actually caution people against that, because that can just become the new formula. You know what I mean? Like, I want to know God, so I'm going to go to where Charlie lives. And we've seen that cause a ton of harm in people and in movements, because they're just like, well, they're radical, and what John's doing is super cool and anarchist and power to the people. Let's go down to Suitcase City or to East Side or to Central Avenue or to Titusville or wherever, and we're going to live there. And they're not going because they heard from God, or they're in a journey with him of knowing him and knowing his heart. So yeah, just give me some thoughts on that.
Well, also talk about bringing harm. I mean, it also brings harm to those places often. Like, I think
right.
That resonates. That sounds right. And often I would say, it's funny, I want to say, this is how it worked for me, but at the same time, I don't want you to come.
Well, no, that's exactly right. That's what I'm saying is we sometimes are too quick to say, you got to do this. You got to give it all up and go to this place. And they're like, okay, cool. Is there a house in your neighborhood? And you're like, not my place.
Don't come here. That's going to be
don't come and mess everything up here. And so the other side of that equation is, we live in a country where there's so many people, maybe less than there was 30 years ago, but there's so many people that profess to follow this God of the Bible. And it's hard to wrap our minds around, because we see so much of this kind of cultural Christianity, this apathy, this nominalism in their pursuit of faith. But as I've surveyed over the past however many years, I've found so much consistency in stories of people who said that their faith, in a sense, ceased at that fourth phase, that orthotopic phase. Does that make sense? Like they were passionate in their 20s. They encountered God. They're on fire. They're like knowing him. They're loving him. And then he says, now I want you to come to where like my presence is really dwelling. And that's among the hurting, the marginalized. And that's where we tend to go. I'm gonna hang tight. I'm gonna hang back on that one because that makes me nervous. It's that Mexico story. Was it Mexico?
Yeah.
It's that story of like, do you want me to stop pruning you? I think that's incredibly profound in this conversation. I would almost wager, without being able to gather my thoughts completely on this idea, but I would almost wager that the overwhelming majority of people's faith seem to become stunted or almost halted at that moment of saying, "Nah, I can't go to Mexico, man. But I love you, and I love knowing you, and so I'm going to stay here where I am, wherever that is. So just stay with me here. He's not going God. He loves you. He's not going to judge you. All that kind of stuff. But you look back and you go. People can almost pinpoint. Oh man, I was just like you when I was 24, or I was just like you when I was 19, or I was 31, and then you go, what? Tell me what happened. Well, life got busy, this. But do you remember a moment? And a lot of times, man, there was this moment of, now I want you to follow me into this place. And it's going to require some things of you. And that was the moment where we said, nah, I'm gonna hang back on that one.
You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. And I think like it often is not till the point where we realize that we're called to come and die that we actually are confronted with the actual call of Christ on our lives, like the call to the cross. And I just want to identify, as you're talking, I have like the idea of like the law, like I have an experience of a loss of faith. Like I went 3 years where I was like, I couldn't acknowledge that there was a God at all, whatever. I was still here doing the thing, whatever. But ultimately I would say like my understanding of faith is that it's something that has a hold of me, as opposed to that it's something that I have that I could lose. Right. And I have a bit of insensitivity to that idea. And as you're talking about it, I'm like, oh, interesting. Like it's when the rubber meets the road, like it's almost like there's something that we have, like an interest, like an intrigue, like a whatever. But for me, like, and I don't know, like what comes to mind is like, well, these things don't feel up to me, right? Like I'm in the grip of something greater than myself that pulls me into these into the play. Like who wants to like spend time facing death or confronting suffering, or it's like our lives are constructed to avoid trash, death, sickness, poverty. It's like that's what we're in the game of. And I think part of the risk of like what we know to be Christianity in our country is often that it is like complicit in that avoidance of those exact things, right? That it's like it's not calling us into those places or those gutters or those wounds or those alleyways. And so then when we bump into it, when we're like, oh man, I don't know that I want to go to like the Mexico City. I don't want to go to this place. And like, cause it's hard. And it's like, and I agree. I think you're right. People go, nah, there was a moment. But when you go, people walk away. I'm like, isn't that just the parable of the soils? Like, they sprung up quick, but they were choked out by the cares of the world. Like, I care about living. I care about keeping my kids taken care of. I care about the school. Like, I care about the, and like, these are reasonable concerns, by the way. Like, right. Everybody, right. Like, I don't believe any parent on the planet should want their kids to follow Jesus. I think it's your job to not want them to follow Jesus, because that means downward mobility. It means insecurity. It means vulnerability. It means the way of suffering. It means death. And your job as a parent in your DNA is the opposite of that.
You should write a children's book.
Yeah. Well, nobody would buy it for their kids. Anyway, so that's my thought about that immediately. Like I think you're right. but it's weird. I just at least want to identify, like, I don't know. I'm at least insensitive to it to go, yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I know what what you're saying, summary is to move from that third seed to that fourth seed is, it's an inevitable moment. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's the start. It's like all of this is leading up to this moment. But like we use language like a leap of faith, right? It's like, well, this is the moment to leap. Like it's actually when the rubber meets the road. Like people talk. So here's another concept. People talk about submission. Like I'm submitted to this leader. It's like that only really comes true when there's a disagreement. When you're like, no, they're wrong. Then it's like, well, are you submitted? Because the answer is probably no. Right. Yeah. And now I'm not actually I'm not a huge, like, let's advocate.
Right. I'm with you.
What I'm saying is it's men saying I'm faithful to my wife, but they're never in situations where they're pushing off the opportunity to commit adultery. It's like, that's not a virtue until you've had to say no. Like the rubber had to meet the road. And we're glad to take credit for being faithful to our wives when no one's trying to sleep with us. We're glad to take credit for being a faithful Christian when we've never been called to task. We're glad to take credit for being nonviolent when we've never been confronted with actual violence. You know, it's like that's when the rubber meets the road and you find out what you really believe. And before that's just propaganda, a story we tell ourselves that we really like. And we tell it about ourselves, you know?
Yep. All right. So what are you thinking?
You guys are brilliant. You cracked the code. No, I would say as I've kind of been processing what y'all been saying and some of the verses that have been put out there and different types of things. I'm not going to give all the orthos, but essentially it's what you think, feel, do, and where you go, right? But when we look at the Great Commission, right? We put our faith in Christ, and what does he say? Well, he tells us to go and to do. And I think a lot of times we get bogged down with what we think and feel. And it's not to diminish the importance of doctrine, that we are called to worship in truth. We are called to worship in spirit. But I think we've elevated those to a higher level than maybe he has called us to, in the sense of when he says to go, to the point of place, to do, which is the point of practice. I think those will then help inform and influence our thoughts and feelings, and shape them and form them in the image that he has for them to be. But we put our thoughts and feelings first. And I think that is really where our faith ends up probably falling short, because of what we think and or feel, and then whether we agree or don't agree, whether we feel good or don't feel good. And that's how we then put the measure based on emotional or, theoretical faith, as opposed to the place and practice that he wants to place us that will inform those other things. And so I do have like a tendency to like get a little work based at times in my faith, and or got my daddy issues just like the next dude, or I've got to earn God's love. And so I'm not like sitting here claiming to have it all figured out. But if we do just, again, read his word and try not to add to it, and he's simply saying, go, right? If you love me, obey. I want you to go and I want you to do. I think we have to do that first and foremost before we think and feel a little bit. And I'm a head guy, so I'm a thinker. My wife's an emotional girl. She's a feeler. But at the end of the day, it technically doesn't matter what she feels, and it technically doesn't matter what I think. We are called to go and we were called to do, regardless of what I think or what she feels. We have to honor the word and obey the commands that I think he's put in front of us.
So good. That was so well said, man.
Yep. So the title, John, of this is going to be the 3 orthos, right?
4.
Oh, sorry, I missed that part. This has been great, though.
Yeah, and I almost feel like we need to have a part 2 of this conversation, because we need to talk about, there's a question, I've been struck by this question that they ask here in their community: what is good? And it's kind of screwing me up, man. It's like sending my mind in all of these directions of philosophy and anthropology and like human story and generational burdens. And so that I want to talk more about that at some point with Chalie on the line with us, like what is really good and how do we determine that? But I guess I want to say one more time, because I'm hung up on this thinking feeling thing. This is super profound because we're all either thinkers or feelers in a sense. And we got to remember, though, Jesus did teach them for a long time, up until, let's say, Luke 10, which is like the pre-commission commission. Matthew 28, is the big sending, but before that, he did some like practice sendings. I mean, he was still teaching them how to think and feel. And the reason I think that's important is not to create conflict in the idea, but more to say, I think that the majority of our faith is built on those two concepts. Mm-hmm. And really, it's the last, how did you say it? Go and do. The going and doing, maybe we could even think of it as an idea of that's adulthood. Like as children, a lot of what I'm doing with my kids is I'm teaching them how to think and feel. But when I send them off into their real life, their life story, it's sending them off into go and do. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I just think it's really worth pointing out. I mean, you're right. It's the doing. And actually, what's interesting, because you put that together, he said place and practice over thoughts and feelings. And I'm like, oh, that's so well said, concisely. And it ultimately, I'm like, there's this, you guys are probably familiar with the like cognitive behavioral therapy triangle, yep. Right? You have thoughts, feelings, behaviors. And there's this, I think what we're coming to is this clear prioritization of the doing, of the practice, of of behavior over thoughts and feelings. Like thoughts matter, feelings matter, thinking about feelings matter. But, and this is the one time I love to invoke the King James version is be ye doers, right? That James call to be ye doers, to go and do likewise is what Jesus said, right? It's like, do it and then see how you feel and see what you think, and then do it again and see how you feel, see what you think, and do it again. But it's this primary position of place and practice, which I just think is like, I don't know, man. I was like, as you close that up, I'm like, that was so well put together that I'm grateful for that. It felt very clear and profound. I think I do need to get somewhere. I'm really, dude, Chalie, man, let's get you on here multiple more times, man. Let's do this again. I'm really glad Taylor was able to get over there. I look forward to catching up with you more. And yeah, so until next time, appreciate you guys.
Yeah, appreciate you guys as well.
See you, boys.